Hello, Tom Levecki here with the latest edition of the New Theory Podcast. This will be an audio only monologue, and I want to discuss Trump's biggest accomplishments and failures as a one term president. I'm going to say as balanced as I can. I'll give some my opinion because I'd like to offer my opinion, but I want to reconcile kind of or summarize, if you will, his presidency, and I want to bucket them into some things that he did well, and then obviously it is rife with some failures. So without any further ado, I first want to address the biggest accomplishments. At the end of the day, he was our 45th president. There are folks that put him in office. I know there are some people that are vehemently against him, and I get it. Trust me, I get it. But as a podcaster and as a person who follows politics, I'd like to just share my view and my thoughts on first his accomplishments from President 45, Donald J. Trump. So the first thing that he did was whether we liked it or not, he installed a lot of federal judges, 220 on the federal bench to say at the bare minimum, which is a lot. And they each get lifetime appointments. So the thing there is what that happens is you now have a circuit of judges that will lean conservative. So this will have an effect on our court system for, arguably for the next 30, 40, 50 years. And then as those precedents get set, they build off those precedents so it can last for generations. So some people may argue this is not an accomplishment, but in terms of a president, it literally was a huge accomplishment in terms of the number of judges appointed to the federal bench. His nominees make up for roughly 25% of all the U.S. circuit judges. So he obviously appointed 3 Supreme Court judges, most notably recently, Amy Coney Barrett. So again, the 3 judges there, and theoretically, are conservative, and he helps obviously, well, not just tip the scale because the scale was already tipped, but you now have 6-3 conservative leaning on the highest court in the country versus 3 that, right leaning versus 3 that turned to be left leaning. The Space Force, you guys are going to laugh, but he put together a Space Force, which is the 6th branch of the U.S. Armed Forces, and it's the newest military installation since 1947. So I know it sounds a little crazy, but it's not to protect us against aliens, but it's tasked with protecting U.S. military assets in space. Those great satellites that check out foreign overseas terrorists, that does a great job at locating important assets overseas that need to be seen that may not be able to have local monitoring, and much, much more. So this Space Force is a little bit bigger of a deal than touted. Tax reform. So we can argue on this, but this was one of the biggest overhauls on the nation's tax code in literally 30 years. There's an argument that it fueled the growth of the economy prior to COVID. The corporate tax rate went down to 35 to 21%. Again, some people believe by having that 40% differential, rather than just distribute to shareholders, may invest in their businesses, which include capital, infrastructure, people, and so forth, which fuels the economy. Critics argue that's a windfall from massive corporations, so that at the expense of the middle class, and not the first time you probably heard that. However, there's an argument that it has fueled some of the growth. Steve Mnuchin, who I'm a big fan of personally, Goldman Sachs guy, raised GDP 3%, and Trump was down at 6%. Interesting enough is we can review that in hindsight and determine for the most part it did appear to have economic growth prior to the COVID pandemic. However, we must note, because we are fair balance, that much of this growth did start on the tail end of the Obama presidency. As a guy from New Jersey, I felt the blue states got slammed. You can only write off $10,000 of your property taxes, and my home property taxes are $22,000. So I basically have to pound salt for that $12K, and it cost me about probably $40K to make that $12K. So I'm an entrepreneur and I have some overhead. So with that being said, yeah, pretty much a 40K hit from Donald J. Trump. But again, it is what it is, and some folks made out, and some didn't. Some would argue that it was one of his accomplishments. This is a biggie. The First Step Act. He signed it into law in December of 18. As the first legislation that really, really looks to reform the criminal justice system. There definitely was some like sketchiness going on where if you were caught with like crack, you were put away for 10 years. But if you were an Upper East Side white dude and caught with coke, you were put away. Not even put away. You were sent to programs or rehabs and that kind of stuff. So I think there was an underbelly or an undertone of, well, not even an undertone, an overtone of it being racially disproportionate. That's part one. And then part two, people thrown in jail that just literally shouldn't be there. They should be rehabilitated, and they should have a better chance at life. And the First Step Act was really a great, great bill. I believe it came from Tim Scott of South Carolina. I'm a big fan of Tim Scott and a lot of the stuff that he's trying to do for the African American community. Some people don't always agree with his views, but he definitely tries to make change through legislation. They killed some bad dudes, the ISIS guys, and then Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who was a super threat to the United States. U.S. has been going after this guy for 5 years. They finally got to him in March 19. Trump said ISIS was totally defeated at this point. I don't think that's the case. But that was considered a military objective and military success. And then obviously there was not any retaliation. So it's one of those things that you can argue that was a good thing. You cut off the head of the snake or you cut off the head of the octopus. The rest usually dies. There's still 18,000 troops fighting in Syria and Iraq. In terms of terrorists that were battling, but they definitely lost some ground over the years. And there's some truth that the U.S. government and its presence either trained the local authorities to fight the caliphate or provided direct resources. So therefore, this was a big win. Well, we cannot talk about the wins without some pretty big failures. And I gotta. If you see my tone, I'm not, super pro-Trump, but I also try to be as fair balanced as I can. But some of these failures were pretty big failures from both the social, political, and some could argue even a legal standpoint. Those being, I want to start off with, I believe are the most important outside the Capitol rush, are the Charlottesville and George Floyd matters. His response, it was, it was a neo-Nazi rally in Charlottesville, for those who remember. Wasn't that long ago, and it just was emblematic about his struggle to put the country together after tragedies. And I know he said many sides, and if you really listen to the whole part, they did take a soundbite, but he said there's fine both people on many sides, I believe, that were willing to address the statue, I believe, of Robert Lee, etc., that he didn't address the neo-Nazis as both sides. But nevertheless, you had neo-Nazis on one side. You had, people contra protesting against the neo-Nazis. They just should have just been categorically blanketed across the board as just saying that's not the right thing to do. It's kind of like saying, hey, there was kind of a good neo-Nazi there who was there for the wrong reason. Well, I don't buy that. So that was just shitty, not good. And even Lindsey Graham at one point said, we're dividing Americans, not healing them. So that was just a really, really good opportunity to step against the KKK, to step against the neo-Nazis, and stamp out that vermin for good. Following the death of George Floyd at the hands of the Minneapolis police and nationwide protests, Trump failed to rise occasion there as well, continuing to divide in the country. I believe Joe Biden sent a video into the funeral. He didn't want to go because he didn't want to usurp it. But George Floyd did not get anything for the president. Maybe some well wishes. I think there was a tweet. And then he was in, I believe, Kenosha, and literally did not visit his family. So just it's kind of like a he cannot shed the racist tinge, and that's partially why. And again, I'm speaking to Trump supporters. I want you guys to listen to this to look at the other side of the fence. There was really, and there shouldn't be another side of the fence when it comes to racism because it's not acceptable. But what I'm saying here is this has been a big failure from that perspective. Our image globally next is in shambles. I know we had some issues with Merkel over in Germany, France, and so forth. And it's just when this, I know we pulled out of, certain NATO support, WHO, and so forth. I get it. I fully get it. But one thing that COVID does tell you is we are a global economy. Look how quickly it's spread. We travel a lot between countries for both business and personal. And the worldview, which again, you guys may say, hey, I'm a nationalist, America first. I agree with you. But if you look at the stats, our GDP, our GMP, gross national product, is contingent upon foreign matters. They're big customers of ours. We're big customers of theirs. And then again, isolating ourselves as Americans is not always the right move. Next, the separations between migrant children. Again, if I'm on the right, I'm going to argue, hey, it was done before, or hey, catch and release didn't work, or if you're driving drunk and there's a kid in the car, sure you should be separated from your parent because they put you in danger and you are breaking the law. I'm with all of that, but I don't want the government separating people from their children. It is traumatic. I know some of these folks are not entering the country in the right way, and there's things that could be done, which, again, I fully understand. But to take migrant children from their parents, with at least 6 migrant children dying in U.S. custody in September 18th alone, supposedly reported, it's just not good. So it's just, I get it, guys. We want people to come the right way. My family came from Italy. They came, quote unquote, the right way. But you know what? It's easy to come the right way when you've come from a lighter skin, an Anglo country, a Nordic country, and it's just much easier. Maybe you have more resources. Maybe you do it the right way. And you could even argue from even African countries. We have Nigerian immigrants here that come over, legally and have like the highest, percentage of advanced degrees and so forth. So I get it, but you know what? The truth of the matter is that the world is a bad place. There's some bad people in Central America. They're trying to get to this country, but I don't think separating them from the children reaches a political and moral objective. That's just my opinion. If you're listening this far in, definitely think that was a black eye for the president. Iran, Syria, and Afghanistan just unilaterally pulled out of the nuclear deal, which again, the Iran nuclear deal and so forth was not a great deal. But then, he's a master in the art of the deal. Why didn't we renegotiate and then discuss, why don't we find out a deal that works, not send them billions of dollars of cash? I don't believe the Obama and Biden administration did the right thing there. But I felt that by pulling out of that deal, again, it was a bad deal. And those listening that are Trump supporters, hopefully you're still listening, that it was a bad deal, but it could have been renegotiated and done correctly. Because all these things that when we pull up from Iran and then piss off Iran and then we piss off the Middle East and so forth, what does it do? It helps advance Russia's interests because that's what Russia ultimately wants. The Affordable Care Act, he was out for it to begin with. I get the requirement that you have to pay in if you're healthy. I agree with him repealing that. I agree with him starting to the individual mandate. That was it. And I get why he was trying to massage it and redo it. I fully understand that. But he was trying to take care of the core of it, which is, and again, I know Ben Shapiro says, well, healthcare is a service and his wife's a doctor and she should get paid for it too. I agree. There should be a free market for those that are able to afford it and not be tethered to the marketplace. So I agree with getting rid of the individual mandate, but everybody should have a universal right to healthcare where they have to pay for it whether it's subsidized or whether it is paid for through programs that we can afford. Again, I'm going to put the asterisk in, we can afford and find a way to pay it. You can't lower taxes and then increase your expenses. That's not going to work. So hopefully Joe Biden will figure that out. Obviously impeachment. Obviously it was politically motivated. I believe he was impeached twice by the House. I don't want to get too much into that because it's a whole nother discussion. But just was considered a black eye. The pandemic, and his philosophy was, let's roll it down to the states. Let's give the states their resources. Let's let them do it. Kind of a decentralized strategy, and that may work when you're relying on assuming a strong governor or assuming a weak governor. And he says all the time that Cuomo, in his opinion, was a weak governor. So with that being said, just a decentralized strategy was not great in terms of COVID. We got a ton of people unemployed. Obviously, the worst outbreak now, 400,000 deaths, and more Americans have died from the virus than the number of U.S. soldiers killed in combat in every war since 1945 combined. I kind of feel like he downplayed the virus, which went against his public health experts, Fauci, Birx, etc. He brought in Scott Atlas, who personally I'm not a huge fan of. I think he's too far right leaning when it comes to public health issues, and got Corona himself. Which should be the most protective man in the world. When he reported to veteran reporter Bob Woodward, said, "Hey, you know what? I knew it was really bad, but I don't want to scare people." Well, if you're going to decentralize resources, they need to centralize the thought and decentralize our response. Meaning, hey, guys, this is really bad. Here's what we're doing about it. And I kind of feel like he didn't take, accept responsibility, because his response was slow. When asked for machines, he says, "What am I, a shipping clerk?" Would there have been a lot of deaths? Yes. Would have been made the same amount of deaths? Probably. It's extremely communicable. For those that are super right wing, I will even speak to, again, I'm an educated person, excess mortality. Of the 400,000 people, how many would have died within the same year? We can run algorithms and different stuff for that. But I go back to when my mother was 76 years old. She was diagnosed with cancer. At first, she didn't want to fight it. She was old school. She's like, "I'm going to die anyway." We begged her to get a mastectomy. She did. She lasted a total of 6 years, and I would not trade one day of the 6 years. And I do not consider that excess. Those that last 6 years. But I enjoyed those years with her. She met my son, who was born 2 years before she passed. Unfortunately, she did not meet my daughter, who was born recently. But when I hear excess mortality, hey, how many of those people would have died? How many of those people would have lived? Guys, I don't buy it, and I would hold on to those 6 years. The economy, net, he's a business guy. Many of us are entrepreneurs or business people, and although he gets credit for a robust U.S. economy before the pandemic, now it is back to where it was in 2007, 2009. The stock market may be doing well, but unemployment's high, underemployment's high. I know interest rates are low, and we're trying to get stuff back, but there is a K type recovery. What does that mean? If you're on Wall Street, you're killing it. But if you own that Greek restaurant on the corner that has a 50 top place, 12 tables, you're hurting right now. And the truth is, it has to do directly with the pandemic. And we can argue that, some of the governors have taken more of a draconian measures, like Cuomo, Murphy, and DeSantis took the oath of, hey, you know what, we're staying open, and people are going to get it anyway. What's the difference? And the truth lies are probably somewhere in the middle is the best way to go. But nevertheless, there are people hurting from a financial perspective. He got COVID himself, which again, he should be the most protected man on the planet, or person on the planet. So lastly, damaging democracy. It's just it's disgusting what happened with the Capitol. He encouraged them. He provoked them. If there's any people that do lean super right, and if there's even an ounce of support, drop me a line at Tommy New Theory, because I don't see how, just like the George Floyd incident, 96% of Americans were categorically against what happened. And I don't know what the other 4% were thinking, but you can't even get 94% of Americans to agree on anything, like the time or the day or a color on the wall. So that's a high number for Americans. We're an extremely divisive a country, especially recently. But even more so now, the Capitol incident, it's just deplorable. And I use that word deplorable. And, I believe a few people died. A woman was shot in the neck. A few police died. Some people died from ancillary stress associated with it. And, Mr. President, that blood is on your hands. I mean, there's no two ways about it. I mean, the Capitol is where is sacrosanct to our democracy and to our republic. So anyway, that's my thoughts just on President Trump's number 45. Biggest accomplishments and failures from our one-term president. And no matter what, we do have to get some healing going. And I know we're slanted on the left in the Senate, and it's been slanted on the left in the House. So I'm not a huge Pelosi fan. I'm becoming less and less of a Schumer fan. In my personal opinion, I just hope God gives them the grace to do the right thing for the most Americans, not get agendas through. So those are my thoughts. I'd love to hear your thoughts at tom@newtheory.com. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review on any platform that you listen to. And thanks for listening.